So this is the cell cycle, and I'll show you how this will look on your test. I have a blank one that you look, but a cycle means it keeps repeating. So when you were when you were a zygote, well, the sperm and the egg came together, right? And they made that cell, that zygote. Well, you didn't stay in that zygote form. You actually had to make more cells, right? So what happens is the cell duplicates itself. But you start out with, you get 23 chromosomes from mom and 23 chromosomes from dad. So when you're a zygote, you have 46 chromosomes. And that's just normal. If unless you've got like a trisomy, like Down syndrome or something, they've got 47. But so you've got 46 chromosomes. Well, the cell's going to half itself. But if it just halves itself, then you would be then 23 and 23, and then it halves itself again, and you would get like 11 and a half, 11 and a half. So it can't just keep dividing in half. It actually has to double itself at some point and then split. So this is the process the cell goes through in order to make copies of itself. It's called the cell cycle. We kind of learned the actual division itself is called mitosis. This is when it's really dividing. So this is dividing. So in high school, you probably might have learned interphase. I used to teach my high schoolers actually this. Any of you ever heard of PMAT? Don't pee on the mat. So this is interphase, prophase, metaphase, anaphase, and telophase. PMAT. These are mitosis. So this right here, this is what's going on here. This is where PMAT is. They've added another phase in there called prometaphase. That's why you're seeing 5 things there. And then you have something called cytokinesis. We'll talk about that in a minute. But, well, we might as well put it here. It's this word right here. So when you might have learned when you were in high school, interphase is when the cell is just resting. They say that's what we used to say, but actually interphase, it is not just resting. It's doing a lot of stuff during interphase. So do you see right here, all of this, which is the majority of this little pie chart thing, is interphase. This G1, S, G2, this is all interphase. So this is the cell getting ready to divide, is what that's doing. We used to say it was the resting phase. A lie. It's not resting. It's getting ready to divide. Okay, kind of like someone getting ready to have a baby. They don't just rest. They're getting things ready, buying stuff. So the cell's doing lots of stuff here, dividing here. Cytokinesis is when they finally just come apart. Okay, so this is coming apart. It's apart. So we're going to start here, because that's technically, but it is a cycle because it happens again. So back when you were a zygote, sperm, egg came together, okay? And now you are a one-cell organism with 46 chromosomes. So it's called a zygote. You're a zygote. You started at G1. And what happened was, it's called G1 because they call it growth phase 1 is what it is. So your cell is growing. You're starting to make somewhat copies of some things that you need copy of. So I just really want you to know during this one, the cell is growing. Getting ready. Cell growing. That's called the G1 phase. Growth phase is why it's called. It's part of interphase. And then we move on this way. This is when, remember when I said that you had, you got 23 from mom, 23 from dad, so you have 46 chromosomes. This is when your DNA is going to make a copy of itself. Whoops, can't spell self. Come here, you. This happened to my pen. I've lost my pen. There it is. So DNA is copying itself. It's got more wordy stuff here. What I'm writing in blue is kind of what I need you to know. So it's going to double up to 92. So luckily you don't have 92 chromosomes. You look kind of weird if you had 92 chromosomes, because it's getting ready to divide. Okay, so this cell's just growing. DNA copies itself during what's known as the S phase. I used to know what that S stood for. I don't remember now. So you can Google it. It has a word, but it's called the S phase. Growth phase, G1 phase, S phase, that's DNA copying itself. And then we've got more growing, but what's happening here is when the DNA copies itself, sometimes it messes up copying. Have you ever copied notes and you sometimes misspell things or miswrite things? So this is like doing a double check. So G2, which is more growth, but we're checking for errors. So they call it double check. Double check. It's like when you should check over your work before you turn it in. Now that doesn't mean errors don't still happen. There are things that still happen and we do get mutations, but there is at least a little bit of a check going on. Some repairs are being made in G2. So you started out as that one cell, you grew, copied, double check to make sure everything's okay, and now we're going to split. The cell's going to start to split, and that is known as mitosis. This is the cell coming apart. Cytokinesis is when the cell completely comes apart. So this is when the cell is splitting apart. See how it's one cell and now it's two cells? And then that process happens again. It repeats, okay? It repeats until, so when you cut yourself, you got to repair yourself. So your body's like, oh, mitosis, let's start doing this. If it completely doesn't need to make another copy, it'll rest, which is down here. And I don't care about the G0. So G1, S, G2, mitosis, cytokinesis. That's the cell cycle. Here's PMAT. This is mitosis. This is when the cell is actually getting ready and going to divide. So when it gets ready to divide, first thing that happens is the chromosomes start to kind of just line up. They're not quite, they're just kind of like getting ready and lining up where they need to be. Metaphase, meta means in the middle. This is when the chromosomes are dead in the middle of the cell. Not cell, yes, cell, in the middle of the cell. Technically it's in the nucleus, but that's okay. In the cell. Ana means apart. So ana is when the chromosomes start to pull apart from one another. Can you see them starting to come apart from one another? So meta, they're in the middle. Ana, they pull apart. They start pulling apart, going to opposite sides. And telophase is when they've reached the opposite sides and we start to see two different cells. They have not come apart yet. They're still kind of still attached. So it looks like this. Here are the actual models. So I've got them in order. So when the chromosomes are just kind of like scattered about, this is prophase. Meta, can you see them in the middle? That's metaphase. Here's anaphase, where they're starting to pull apart, ana apart. And telophase is when we start to look and have two different ones. This is probably close to cytokinesis. I'm not gonna label cytokinesis for you. So these models will get labeled and you'll have to tell me what phase that model is. So there's a picture of each of the four models that we have in lab. I took a picture of them for you.